Emily gently rocked her 7-month-old son Liam as she gazed out the window at the Boston skyline. The weight and warmth of this tiny life in her arms brought her a happiness that was beyond compare. "Liam, Mama will always protect you," she whispered. Working as a nurse in the pediatric department at Boston General Hospital, Emily understood the weight of responsibility that came with having a child better than most. Her husband James was successful as an environmental consultant, and the peaceful home they had built together was Emily's greatest treasure. She heard the sound of coffee brewing in the kitchen. James was preparing breakfast. He was a kind and thoughtful husband who had been actively involved in childcare since Liam was born. If there was one worry, though, it was his relationship with his family. "Emily," my mother called. "She wants to stop by this afternoon," James said. Emily sighed softly at James's words. His mother, Patricia, was pleasant enough on the surface, claiming to enjoy making things by hand and constantly bringing gifts. However, her creations were always shoddy, sometimes completely unusable. Just last month, she had knitted a sweater for Liam that had sleeves of different lengths and a neck opening too tight to put on. "Sophia's coming too," he added. "Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home?" That's exactly what I did with her stories. No face, no voice. Check a link in the description if you're curious. Emily's expression darkened further at the mention of James's sister Sophia. She affirmed everything her mother did and didn't even try to hide her snide remarks toward Emily. "It'll be fine. Mom just wants some attention," James said. But Emily knew it wasn't that simple. She sensed something intentional behind the smiles Patricia and Sophia showed. The way they treated James when she wasn't around was so different from how they behaved when she was present. At 3 in the afternoon, the intercom rang as expected. "Welcome, Patricia, Sophia." Emily greeted them with as natural a smile as she could manage. Patricia was dressed in expensive designer clothes. Sophia, who had inherited her mother's good looks, wore perfect makeup and sophisticated clothing as usual. "Emily, how have you been?" "Where's Liam?" Patricia asked as soon as she entered. "He just woke up from his nap. He's in the living room." When they entered the living room, Patricia's face lit up at the sight of Liam in James's arms. "Oh, my precious grandson. It's Grandma." Patricia took Liam in her arms, acting as if he were her own child. Then she pulled a package from her large bag and handed it to Emily with a proud expression. "It's a special baby blanket. I worked really hard on it. It's my hobby. I'm sure you like it." Emily thanked her and opened the package. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary pastel blue blanket, but the texture was strange, with areas that felt oddly stiff, like soap residue. "It's a bit tacky, but it suits you perfectly," Sophia said with a meaningful smile. In that moment, Emily felt an indescribable unease about the glance exchange between the sisters. However, to keep peace in the family, she expressed her gratitude. "Thank you, Patricia. I'll cherish it, please do. It's a very special blanket." There seemed to be something hidden in Patricia's words. Emily picked up the blanket again and examined it closely. The stitching was sloppy, and there was a faint, distinctive odor. James tried to honor his mother's feelings by placing the blanket near Liam, but Emily had already decided in her heart she would never use this blanket for her child. Emily carefully folded the blanket from Patricia and tucked it away in the back of her bedroom closet, hiding it under clothes she rarely wore. She had already prepared several soft, safe, organic cotton blankets for Liam. As a professional nurse, she was extremely careful about what she used for her baby. "I'll just bring it out when Patricia visits," she told herself. Over the next few weeks, Patricia began visiting surprisingly often. She had developed a habit of asking the same question each time, "Are you using that blanket? Does Liam like it?" Emily always gave vague answers and occasionally brought out the blanket to show her, but as soon as Patricia left, it went right back into the depths of the closet. She simply couldn't bring herself to use it for her baby. "James, I can't understand. why your mother is so fixated on that blanket, Emily confided to her husband one day. Mom just wants to feel like her creations are being used. You're overthinking it, James replied, but Emily wasn't convinced. A month later, on a Friday night, Emily was working the night shift at the hospital. James was left to take care of Liam alone. Though not as meticulous as his wife, he was serious about his responsibilities as a father. In the middle of the night, Liam began to cry. James changed his diaper and gave him milk, but he wouldn't stop crying. James gently picked up his son and walked around the living room, trying to soothe him. Suddenly, Liam moved vigorously and spit up on the blanket James had wrapped him in. Oops, it's okay, Liam. James calmed the baby and removed the soiled blanket, thinking he needed to replace it with a clean one. He searched the closet. He couldn't find any blankets on the shelf where Emily usually kept them. As he continued searching, he found Patricia's blanket hidden under some clothes. This will do, he thought, and wrapped Liam in it. Fortunately, Liam quickly calmed down and fell asleep. The next morning, when Emily returned from her night shift, James was preparing breakfast in the kitchen. Liam was sleeping peacefully in his crib. Good morning. Emily kissed James. How was last night? It was fine. He spit up a little, but no problem, James answered with a smile. Oh, I need to wash the blanket Liam was using. Emily went to check on Liam and smiled at the sight of her sleeping son. Then she casually glanced at the crib and noticed Patricia's blanket. She gasped. James, why did you use this blanket? James turned around, surprised by Emily's tone. Liam spit up, so I replaced it with this one I found in the closet. Is there a problem? Emily took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. This is Patricia's blanket. I've been keeping it away from Liam. Why? You need to consider Mom's feelings. I can feel it. There's something wrong with this blanket. James scratched his head. You're overreacting. It looks normal enough. Anyway, I'll wash it. Emily tried to stop him, but James had already taken the blanket to the laundry room. She was tired, so she decided to lie down for a while. Liam was sleeping safely, and washing the blanket shouldn't be a problem, she thought. Several hours later, Emily was awakened by a shout. Emily, look at this. James's voice contained obvious distress. Emily rushed to the living room, where James stood trembling, holding the blanket spread out in his hands. Emily froze when she saw the blanket. The blanket, discolored by water and heat, clearly revealed a hospital logo and symbols. The words biohazard processed in red and medical waste identification codes were clearly visible. This blanket was medical waste. It could contain hazardous substances. Emily instantly understood with her nurse's knowledge what it meant. James looked at his wife with disbelief. What do you mean? Did Mom deliberately? Emily quickly grabbed her cell phone and contacted her friend, a pediatrician. Although Liam had only been in direct contact with the blanket for a short time, tests were necessary just in case. I need to take Liam to the hospital right away, Emily said, her voice trembling. You call Patricia and ask her to explain what this is. James shook his head as he stared at the blanket. I can't believe it. Mom doing something like this? Emily picked up Liam, trying to stay as calm as possible, but inside her, flames of anger were rising. The pediatric outpatient department at Boston General Hospital was busy even on a Saturday afternoon. Emily was embarrassed to face her colleagues, but she put her son's health first. Her friend Dr. Laura immediately escorted Liam to an examination room after hearing the situation. It's going to be all right, Emily. We'll run tests right away, Laura said, maintaining both her professional coolness and the warmth of a friend. Emily had dealt with many emergencies as a nurse, but when it was her own child in danger, it was difficult to maintain professional composure. She tried to hide her trembling hands as she watched Liam laughing on the examination table. It's good. The contact time was short, Laura said as she looked at the test results. There are no symptoms at this point. We've done blood tests as a precaution, but the results won't be back until tomorrow. We need to know more about the materials and processing of that blanket. Emily sighed with relief. Thank you, Laura. I'm so sorry about this on a Saturday. What are you saying? This is a serious matter, Laura frowned. Where did that blanket come from? A gift from my mother-in-law. You're kidding. Laura's eyes widened. She deliberately gave you something like this? At that moment, Emily's phone rang. It was James. Emily. I called Mom. James's voice was shaking with anger and confusion. I can't believe it. She says it was just a joke. Don't be so angry. I don't understand what kind of joke this is supposed to be. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Liam seems okay for now. We're waiting for the blood test results. James, this isn't just meanness. It could be a legal issue. I know. Determination was evident in James's voice. I'm heading to Mom's house now. I'll talk to her directly. After hanging up, Emily explained the situation to Laura, who immediately took action. Emily, we need to submit that blanket to the hospital's safety management department. Misappropriation of medical waste is a serious issue. Emily nodded. I want to investigate too. Patricia used to work as a nursing assistant at a different hospital. With Laura's help, Emily submitted the blanket in a sample bag to the hospital's safety management department. Then, she accessed the hospital database and began researching the medical waste identification codes. Her colleague Rachel came over to help. This code is from Maine General Medical Center, Rachel said. It's a disposal label from about 2 years ago. You might get more detailed information if you contact that hospital. Emily remembered that her mother-in-law had once worked at Maine General Medical Center. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together. Meanwhile, James had parked in front of Patricia's house. Sophia's car was there too. He knocked on the door, trying to control his anger. James, what's going on? Why such a fuss? Patricia opened the door, pretending as if she knew nothing. Stop pretending, Mom, James said, his voice shaking. That blanket when we washed it. Medical waste markings appeared. Why would you give something like that to a baby? Well, come in. The neighbors will hear you. Patricia ushered her son inside. In the living room, Sophia was sitting on the sofa, polishing her nails. She gave James a small smile when she saw him. You're overreacting. It's just a blanket. Just a blanket? James looked incredulous. It might contain hazardous substances. Liam is at the hospital being tested right now. If it's so dangerous, the hospital should manage it better, Patricia coldly retorted. Besides, your wife always acts like the expert. I just wanted to give her a bit of trouble. That's right, Sophia joined in. It was annoying how Emily always says, as a nurse. We were betting whether she'd notice. James was speechless. He couldn't believe what he was hearing from his mother and sister. So you put a baby's health at risk? Your own grandson? You're overreacting. Patricia waved her hand. It was just a prank. It's not dangerous. Hospitals clean used items before disposal. But why would you do such a thing? James held his head. I worked as a nursing assistant for 20 years, Patricia said proudly. I didn't like that Emily didn't respect my experience. She's always talking about the latest childcare methods and ignoring my advice. And she doesn't use my handmade items, does she? I know she hid them in the closet. Hearing those words, James recalled childhood memories. His mother had always liked pranks. She regularly played small tricks on people she didn't like. He had always turned a blind eye. Mom, this isn't just a prank, he said sternly. Emily has an obligation to report this to the hospital. It could become a legal issue. The color drained from Patricia's face. What? Unauthorized removal of medical waste is a crime, especially if it potentially contains hazardous materials. Wait a minute, Sophia interrupted. Are you going to report your own mother? You're being manipulated by Emily. James stared at his sister. This is about Liam's safety. You don't understand the gravity of what you've done. Emily is now investigating where that blanket came from. Maine General Medical Center, right? Patricia collapsed into a chair. I just wanted to what? What did you want to do? James pressed. I wanted to get back at Emily. Patricia suddenly began crying. because she thinks she's a better mother than me, rejecting my parenting methods. So you put a baby at risk? James couldn't contain his anger. The phone rang. It was Emily. James, I've got confirmation. Her voice was calm, but he could tell there was tension underneath. That blanket is definitely medical waste from Maine General Medical Center. It might have belonged to an infectious disease patient. We're waiting for the blood test results, but the Safety Management Department is taking this situation very seriously. James looked at his mother. Patricia covered her face with both hands, her shoulders shaking. I understand, he answered the phone. I'm coming home now. Let's figure out how to handle this together. After hanging up, James was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, Mom, I'm going to protect Emily and my son. You'll have to take responsibility for your actions. He left his mother's house. In the car, he gripped the steering wheel tightly. He blamed himself for turning a blind eye to his mother's behavior all this time. He should have noticed sooner. Emily's intuition had been right. The living room of Emily and James's home was filled with unusual tension the following afternoon. Official hospital test documents lay on the table, and the two sat side by side on the sofa. Liam was being looked after by a friend in another room. Fortunately, the blood tests came back negative. Liam is safe, Emily said quietly, but low concentrations of formaldehyde and traces of blood components were detected in the blanket. Regular follow-up will be necessary. James sighed deeply. What was Mom thinking? She wasn't thinking, Emily said bitterly. She doesn't understand the seriousness of what she did. The doorbell rang and James stood up. He welcomed attorney Lisa Bennett. I'm sorry to meet you both under such difficult circumstances, Attorney Bennett said with a serious expression. Let me review the situation once more. While Emily explained everything, Attorney Bennett took careful notes. When the story was finished, she reviewed the documents and then looked up. There are two separate issues involved here, she explained. One is a civil matter, the fact that your child was put at risk. The other is a criminal matter, the unauthorized removal of medical waste. Maine General Medical Center is taking this situation very seriously. What are our legal options? Emily asked. The hospital has already begun a formal investigation. If there's evidence that Patricia deliberately removed medical waste, there could be criminal charges. You, as victims, need to decide whether to press charges. James frowned. I don't want to put my mother in jail. I just want her to take responsibility. I understand, Attorney Bennett replied gently. Apart from legal options, think about what you want to achieve. While they were talking, a cell phone rang. The screen showed Patricia. James hesitated for a moment but answered. James. Patricia's voice sounded smaller than usual. I've called the whole family. Could you come to the house this evening? I want to explain. James looked at Emily and Attorney Bennett. They both nodded slightly. All right. I'll come at 5:00 p.m. Emily and James arrived at Patricia's house. Several cars were parked outside, showing that the extended family had gathered. For safety, Liam had been left with Emily's parents. Are you okay? Emily squeezed James's hand. Yes, he answered with a determined expression. Let's face this together. In the living room, James's aunt and uncle, several cousins, and Patricia's sister Ellen had gathered. Patricia and Sophia were in the corner of the room, looking anxious. Thank you all for coming, Patricia said in a weak voice. I wanted to explain what I did. She began explaining yesterday's event in her own way. However, her explanation distorted reality, making it sound as if a harmless prank had been misunderstood. Wait, Emily stood up. We should present the facts accurately. With the coolness and clarity of a nurse, she explained everything that had happened, the nature of medical waste, the dangers it posed, and the potential effects on a baby. As she explained, she pulled the hospital test results from her pocket. This isn't just meanness. It's misappropriation of medical waste, and Liam's life could have been at risk. The room fell silent. Patricia's sister Ellen was the first to speak. Patricia, is this true? Patricia didn't answer and lowered her gaze. Sophia stood up to protest, but Ellen stopped her with a hand. Patricia, this isn't the first time you've done something like this, Ellen said slowly. Maybe it's time to tell the family. The atmosphere in the room changed. James looked at his mother's sister with curiosity. What do you mean? Ellen took a deep breath. Patricia has always had this pattern of behavior, pranks on people she doesn't like. At first, they were harmless, but they escalated over time. She slowly began to tell several past episodes. The real reason Patricia's ex-husband, James's father, decided to divorce, troubles at multiple workplaces, and several strange coincidences that had been rumored among relatives. Your father left because of her behavior, Ellen said to James, because no one tried to confront the issue head-on. The problems only got worse. James collapsed into a chair, shocked. In his memory, his father had abandoned the family because work was too busy. Why didn't anyone tell me? He asked, his voice trembling. We were trying to protect Patricia, Ellen answered sadly. But now I think that was a mistake. Patricia began to cry. I just wanted attention. Emily addressed everyone in the room. This isn't a personal conflict. As a healthcare professional, I had an obligation to report this. Maine General Medical Center has already begun an investigation. Patricia looked up. Are you going to have me arrested? That's not for us to decide, Emily answered calmly. However, I'd like to propose one solution. She explained the conditions she and James had discussed. Patricia would need to undergo professional counseling and seriously commit to treatment. Contact with Liam would be limited until progress was made, and she would formally apologize to the medical center for her actions and cooperate with any legal measures. I think that's the best solution, Emily said. The goal isn't punishment, but genuinely resolving this issue. James stood up and faced his mother. Mom, I've been turning a blind eye all this time. I didn't believe Emily's intuition. I sincerely apologize for that, he said to Emily. Then he turned back to his mother. But now, my son's safety comes first. Unless you get treatment and genuinely try to change, I can't let you see Liam. This is a non-negotiable condition. After a long silence, Patricia answered in a small voice, I understand. Sophia sat next to her mother, her expression softening for the first time. I was wrong too, Emily. I'm truly sorry. That night, in the car returning home, Emily and James were silent for a long time. Thank you, James finally said. You handled this professionally, and you gave my mother a chance to change. Families are complicated. Emily smiled with a tired expression, but we've taken the first step. The real challenge begins now. Forgiveness isn't easy. But somewhere in their hearts, they believed that understanding and responsibility could open the path to true healing. Liam, look at Mama. Say cheese, Emily called to her son, who was wearing a blue and white hat, as she held the camera. Liam was celebrating his second birthday, and the backyard was decorated with a small tent and colorful balloons. The spring day in Boston was mild, with flowers beginning to bloom. The cake is ready. James came out from the kitchen, carrying a cake shaped like a blue dinosaur. A happy smile played on his face. The past year had been a time of change and growth for Emily and James's family. A few months after the incident, they learned they were expecting their second child. Emily's pregnant belly was now rounded, filled with the family's expectations for the new life. Guests are here, Emily said, noticing the sound of the intercom. Emily's parents appeared at the door, along with Patricia, who had a tense expression. Beside her stood Karen, a social worker. Hello, everyone, Emily greeted them calmly. Patricia approached hesitantly, holding a small package. Over the past year, she had attended therapy twice a week, learning about anger management and building healthy relationships. Her contact with the family had been restricted, and she was only allowed to see Liam under supervision. Happy birthday, Liam, Patricia said gently. Her voice no longer had the domineering tone it once had. This is a present from Grandma. James took the package from his mother, carefully checked the contents, and then gave it to Liam. Inside was a handmade stuffed animal. a small bear made with soft cotton and safe materials. "Did you make this yourself?" James asked, looking surprised. "Yes, I learned in a craft class," Patricia answered shyly. "This time, it's truly handmade. I used only safe materials." Sophia, who arrived in the garden later, had also changed. Instead of flashy makeup and expensive clothes, she wore a simple dress, and her previous hostility toward Emily had disappeared. "Emily," Sophia called hesitantly, "let me know if there's anything I can help with." As the party progressed, Emily stood in the corner of the garden, observing her family. James had grown as a father and had developed his own strong opinions. Patricia, though still not perfect, was gradually changing through counseling. Sophia had begun to become emotionally independent from her mother and had moved to her own apartment. Lost in thought, turning around, she saw James standing there with a gentle smile. "Just thinking about how much has changed in the past year," Emily answered. "Mom is really trying," James said, watching Patricia playing with Liam under Karen's supervision across the garden. "It will take time to trust her completely, though. People can change," Emily said quietly, "but it's up to each individual to choose that change." "That's right." James put his arm around his wife's shoulder. "If you hadn't handled it calmly that day, we might not be here today," Emily smiled. "I responded not just as a nurse, but as a human being. A person's true value lies in the courage to acknowledge mistakes and try to change." As dusk approached, the entire family gathered around the table to celebrate Liam's birthday. Repairing damaged relationships is a long journey, but this day symbolized a new beginning. Emily placed her hand on her belly, feeling hope for the future. She knew that while family shapes aren't perfect, with understanding and forgiveness, new bonds can form. The blanket was still kept in the hospital's safety management department, but ironically, the changes it brought had woven new threads into their lives.